Alrighty then. Hello, good evening, and welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is Damn Radio, and you are listening to International Flavor, where the truth just tastes better. Isn't that right? Welcome you to join us on the live stream, which is taking place right now at internationalflavor.com. If you log in and you become a member, you will certainly be able to get alerts when they come up. Now, what I do with this show is typically it is live. I am live on damnradio.com /live if you wish to continue to listen to other important podcasters who are there on our program. If you'd like to be a podcaster on that platform, please contact me. We'll request a couple of samples or links to your work and go from there. My email is samuelt@internationalflavor.com. And I very much look forward to hearing from you. Anyway, today's program, where the truth just tastes better, is about, read an interesting article this morning. Excuse me, in that article. By the way, you can log in while I'm live on Podbean on the stream, but there will be no call-in. This show, if you're listening on Damn Radio at 9 p.m. on Sunday night, this is not a call-in show because I am not live. It is pre-recorded for that platform. So there you have it. But I will be live the rest of the week in studio, and there you have it. So I read this interesting article. The article was talking about, there were some insinuations and whatnot, but it kind of got me thinking a little bit. And that's a dangerous thing because then I go out and do a little bit of research and come up with something hopefully interesting for people to talk about. And what I live in a supposed democracy, United States of America, and I've always been a believer. I've always been a believer in the way that we run our country and all of that. Over the course of my adult lifetime, that's been, let's say, twisted a little bit. They, for example, control elections. Whether you believe it or not, the trust factor is definitely not what it was before. And so there are people that believe, I am one of them, that there are efforts to impact elections. There's always stuff about Russia. There's always stuff about ballot box stuffing. There's always been a history of Democrats being very good at that at the local level. And I don't want to discount the Republicans, but the Democrats have always been far more famous for it. It's a theme in many mafia sort of New Yorkish shows from a long time ago, where they control elections and they control who gets elected and how. And I do believe that there are forces that attempt to impact our elections. And so when I read the one about the AFD in I forget what that acronym means. I want to say Alles für Deutschland or something like that, all for Germany, but I don't remember specifically. There was an article that 7 candidates have died. Excuse me, local candidates for office have died while running for office in Germany this year in a very short period, less than a month. And so there's some insinuation that it's dangerous to run for office. Well, we've had our share of issues in the United States. You know, I remember the Clintons and whether they're conspiracy theory or truth, nobody knows. No, you know, I don't particularly care. I just think it's a bit of an interesting the situation, let's call it, that people are running for office. Donald Trump and his lawfare, that people have attacked him for, Jesus, criminally, for everything. People get destroyed for various reasons by the government. That I absolutely believe in. Or by the deep state. That I absolutely believe in. Leveling the heavy weight of the government against a person happens. This is for real. They do that. There are people who like to eliminate their enemies by using the political power that they have accumulated over the years. And I believe it's worse at the state level, But the longer that people stay in the federal level, the more likely that's to become too. And I do believe that those forces do exist, and that I'm not strange to think that they do. But there are people who would never believe that. Oh, geez, we're a democracy. Now, there's also, and I'm going to look at several different countries as we go through this today, as we put it up. So tonight we're not talking about missiles, budgets, trade agreements. We're talking about survival, political survival, and how do you survive? I mean, what do you do if you're Donald Trump and the world is after you? The deep state people are after you. What do you do if you're in Ukraine, God forbid, and try to be democratic? What about these people in Germany that are dying? So we're going to start with the Germany people that are dying. And in Germany, 7 opposition candidates. I mean, think about this. Would you put your name on a ballot and run for office? Let's presume you're a good person and you want to get out and run for office. And this is a good thing. We want that. We want good people in government. But they frighten people away from government in many ways. And this is historic. People have done it for forever. Like I said, we have movies about it in America. And there's, what did they call them? Manchurian candidate sort of things and all of that are not necessarily disbelieved in America. Let's put it that way. That we tend to believe that there are impacts upon our system. So, would you put your name on the ballot if the outcome could be a smear campaign against you or your family? Maybe a subpoena to go to a hearing of some sort when the government comes after you, the people that you're attempting to either replace in the government or have an influence upon in the government. If they sent you a subpoena to appear or testify or arrest or whatever, or worse, a coffin. You get killed. And there's been a lot of killing lately, and we'll get into some of that today. But in Germany, 7 opposition candidates, all from the AfD party, died in 2 weeks. Just in 2 weeks, they died. In Ukraine, opposition leaders are gunned down in the street. Journalists are murdered or jailed. Parties are dissolved. Priests are arrested. Judges are purged. And nobody pays attention to that. All we do is sit around in the West and wave these blue and yellow flags, and we don't, but what are we allegedly defending over there? It sure as hell ain't democracy, friends and neighbors. In America, we cloak our own eliminations of people from running for office, mostly not by killing them, but by killing them politically. Indictments, bankrupting sorts of lawfare, stuff that they got to pay butt tons of money, and it's politically horrible for them if they're running for office, like Donald Trump. And then they always engage in reputational warfare. So a lot of people don't want to put their hat in the ring. But the outcome, the same of all of these methods, the opposition is silenced. And tonight we're going to map a little bit of the methods that people have used over time to do this. We'll start with Germany's what their government called, or their investigators have called, statistically conspicuous deaths. That's what they have called them. And I'm not sure what I believe, but you can believe whatever you want. I don't care. I'm just think it's an interesting topic to go through. In America, our history of lawfare and campaign, people dying on the campaign trail, those we have a history of that as well. It's a horror story in Ukraine when I tell you about some of that. They have assassinations. They have bans on political parties. They have trials of the clergy and trials of anybody that is in the opposition party. They throw under the bus. Ukraine's not alone, by the way. This is pretty popular, especially in Eastern Europe. And then they have alleged corruption purges, where they attack people, charge them with corruption, and take them out of the field in that way. And then they escape to another country, but they don't impact anybody's ability to control the country of Ukraine anymore. And don't think that the old Z monster is not engaging in any of this, because I believe that he is. I believe that he's deeply involved in it. They're getting rid of journalists. We'll go into a couple of those tonight, that the people they're taking out. Moldova and Georgia, they're jailing the opposition. I've told you a little bit about them in the Moldova one in a previous episode. And then the two, what I call the prime candidates, the cream of the crop, the very best. Okay, and you call them what you like, but I call it the Clinton style of eliminating people. This is called Clinton style lawfare democracy in running for office. And then we're going to compare that to the extreme, which is the Stalinist purge model. You just, well, here's how we get rid of you. Welcome to the gulag. And so let me ask you, after we look at all of those sorts of things, do you think there are good people who are going to run for office in that sort of environment? Will they? And if so, why would they? Or would you? Put it very personally. Would you run for office if the possibility included death? How about if the possibility was only, geez, they're going to destroy you politically? They're going to file a lawsuit against you for taking down a camera. They're going to arrest you and have the highway patrol come to your house and pick you up when you're the chief political figure of a county. And yes, I am talking about Ike Skelton and in Osage, well, in Camden County, and who's the took down the camera. I believe that was a targeting. I believe that Rochelle Christensen had something to do with it. Made sure that it happened. I don't know why she would, but she, whatever little victory she gets out of that, if any. I don't even remember. No, I haven't, unfortunately, looked in a couple of weeks. I've been out of the country, as you know, and I haven't followed up on where that stands right now. Might be over by now, but this is what we do in America, and it is expected behavior anymore to try to destroy your political enemies, and a lot of people don't want to be involved in it. But in America, for the most part, people aren't being gunned down in the streets, although there's been suspicions about it. We'll get to that. No, not so in Ukraine, not so in some of Eastern Europe, certainly not so in the Stalinist gulag purges, right? So let's talk about that. In late August of 2025, this is just in the last couple of weeks, the election of municipal elections in the North Rhine-Westphalia are supposed to take place on September 14, right? And leading up to that, 7 candidates of Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, have died all within days of each other. They're just dying out. And there's been articles about it, conspiracy theory sort of things, because statistically, this shouldn't happen. It's, yeah, everybody all in the same area is just dying off like flies, and there's nothing to it. Officials say 16 candidates in total across all parties died in this cycle, which surprisingly, at least in Germany, they say is not unusual compared to previous elections. Are you kidding me? There's That's terrible. 16 people are over there dying. But AfD accounts for nearly half of those 16, and that is statistically problematic. There's 7 of them. What the AfD leaders called the pattern is statistically conspicuous. That there's something weird about statistics. And me, having been an economics major, and being very much interested in that sort of analysis in politics, especially in politics, is I don't want to say impossible, but it's certainly an intriguing set of statistics for you to look at and compare to regular annual, or not annual, but irregular election statistics from regular elections. So the police say there's no evidence of foul play in any of these. The press reported ballot chaos, meaning because they all have to be reprinted over and over and over. Every time somebody dies, they got to reprint all the ballots and do it again. And if you got 16 people all dying, why the hell are you printing the ballots this far in advance anyway? If you have this many people dying before you get to election time, why in the world are we printing ballots in the first place? Why don't we print them when the election is a couple of days off? Then you have them. Your likelihood of having to reprint them all the time is far less. Anyway, there's been a lot of press reporting about this chaos and reprints and voided mail-in votes and that kind of thing. Says that people have to have all of the election stuff. Well, that kind of leads me to a question about the American system too. What happens if you fill out your mail-in ballot? You're in the Army and they give you this mail-in ballot, and they were always pretty big when I was in the Army. People would come along, your sergeant would come along and go, "Hey, geez, everybody needs a vote. Have you voted in your state? What's your mail-in process?" Go down to the legal department on the base headquarters, and they will get you in touch. I mean, if you need help, it will put. Back then, there was no internet to freaking do it, and go down there, and they will walk you through how to vote in your state from afar, from a distance, mail in ballots, things like that. So maybe something should be done about waiting till the last minute. I'm a fan, I believe, that voting, except in extreme certain circumstances, should be done in person on the day of election, period. That nobody should work that day, that everybody, like in other countries. So I believe that's the way it is in Russia, is that nobody works on the election day and everybody goes and votes. And you can say that they're influenced. I don't know. I haven't ever participated in one. But a lot of people say that, here's what you do, or that the ballots are twisted one way or the other. There's only one candidate on the ballot, or things like that. That's what you used to hear in communism anyway, that one person is on the ballot and you go and pick that. But I don't know the truth of that. I've never physically seen a personal ballot or personally seen a physical ballot from Russia. So at any rate, this brings up a lot of questions when you talk about election procedures in various countries. Well, let's get to the 7 people who died. Okay, the first one's a guy named Wolfgang Seitz. He was 59, from Rheinberg, Wessel district. No details were published about who his family is. Nobody knows, and on what his family is. There's been no real updates, and he died on Saturday, August the 16th of 2025, and his platform, of course, was local AFD. He's anti-tax, anti-migration, migrants from everywhere. And there's a post on X about some of this that came out in the lead up to the elections. Here's some of it. At least 4 primary candidates died in late August that are said to be, and of these 7 of them, or 4 of them, are described as sudden and unexpected. And then 2 more, or 2 of those were also reserve substitute members that died as well. And so they're up to 7 now. At the time of this one coming out, it was only 6. But they talk about a guy named, where is he? Wolfgang Seitz, they say, had a heart attack. Rather odd. And says it was a natural death. Oh, wait, wrong guy. Heart attack, pre-existing conditions, natural death, confirmed is what they say. Now, I'm not saying anything different. That's not my point. But that's how there's death 1, sudden, unexpected. And, in American movies, everybody always gives you some sort of pill that causes you to have a heart attack. Maybe Wolfgang Seitz, age 59, was given something. Maybe we got a U.S. movie on our hand here. I don't think so. I'm not there. I haven't looked at it, but they have discussed his own pre-existing conditions and how that how that came about. Second one's a guy named Stefan Berendes, also 59, from Bad Lipspringe in the Paderborn district. His family he was a married man, he was a jiu-jitsu trainer, and he also died of, he collapsed and had a heart attack during martial arts training. He was a jiu-jitsu guy. And so he died, probably no suspicion. I mean, there is no suspicion of foul play in that. He died, like, apparently right in his jiu-jitsu studio. A guy named Ralph uh, Ralph Lang died. He was age 66, uh, and he had an unexpected death with pre-existing medical conditions. They don't give any detail, and no foul play. He died on August 28th. We have Wolfgang Klinger. This guy was age 71. Not detailed in the press what his family was or anything like that. He was an AFD candidate once Law and Order. They say he died just a couple of days ago, natural death. They had to reprint all the ballots. Nobody's happy about that. Another guy named Patrick Tietze. He was only 42. And he was from Wipperfürth and Oberbergskircher Kreis, and he was family not disclosed. He was on the reserve candidate list, so he wouldn't, not likely have been in office anyway. And he committed suicide. So, well, at least they say he committed suicide. I mean, whatever you believe of your government, that's fine. The next one is a guy named Rene Herford. No idea what the family is. He had kidney failure linked to liver disease, and so no effect there. So we're looking at most of these as just natural causes, and the statistics are out. But 4 of them were what they called sudden. Last one is a guy who is 80. Obviously, I don't believe there's any foul play suspected with an 80-year-old Dr. Hans Joachim Kind, who is 80, longtime resident, local community AFD, and he died of long-standing illnesses and a natural death. Why, if he's that kind, why is he running for office? Anyway, there's been a lot of speculation. The story gained something on social media. Post claims statistically almost impossible odds. They cited economist Stefan Homburg, Elon Musk, and AFD figures boosting the visibility of this. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about political suppression. I don't believe that to be the case myself after my quick look at each of the 7. But some narratives say it's they always talk about this died suddenly thing. Like during COVID, people dying suddenly, and there's lots of skepticism. I'm a natural skeptic. So I went and looked at each of the reasons why these guys passed away, and it appears to me that that's not, that is not the case. Places like Der Spiegel, WR, Welt, and the international outlets BBC report the deaths as coincidental. There's a history of AFD facing some violence, especially among immigration proponents. But the deaths from other parties have also occurred. No formal investigations are underway, blah, blah, blah. All of that. So no matter how you slice it, though, we have 7 coffins in elections in Germany this year. Some of them are elderly people. Some of them had sudden collapses. One of them was suicide, but police say it's all a coincidence. AFD says it's a bit suspicious. Well, sure it is, but that suspicion doesn't mean you got anything more than that. So regardless of whatever the cause, the impact is the same. It's a chaos in the ballot systems. It's a chaos in the election cycle. It makes people talk like I'm talking. It makes people suspicious. Now, this is natural. There's nothing you can do about it. People die, and that's the way it is. And so, chaos in ballots, chill in people, who wants to run for office if there's a perception out there that you're going to die, or people are whispering in the street that that makes him a target or something like that. So what I thought was I would cross the ocean and see historically what goes on in America, because we have our share of lawfare. We've had our share of death most of which is not conspiracy theory related. But my main point is, what methods do those in power use aside from murder, aside from killing, which I believe has occurred even in a nation as pristine in their democracy as the United States. I believe it's occurred in the past. I believe there's been killing of political opponents. I was really troubled recently. Suspicion, of course, arose, and not like you heard in grade school, middle school, high school, college life about the Kennedy death experience. But I'm telling you, people are 10,000 times more suspicious of those events now than they were before. My worry was, could it really be true that Johnson was involved? And some of the things that I heard after the release of all of these really were troubling to me. And I don't know. I wasn't around. What the hell do I know? You know, at the time. But boy, they certainly hid some things, don't you think? And it just, it is definitely troubling. So I thought this show would be a little bit of fun to go into. Fun, a little maybe enlightening to go into and uh, discuss from there. So let's go from statistically conspicuous of Germany to America. Let's move on across the board and start with the lawfare that occurred against Trump. Trump has had, I mean, geez, what has he faced? More simultaneous prosecutions, indictments, and lawsuits than any candidate in American history. And so let's call this not the death model, that we've discovered didn't really occur in the opinion of this show, this host, didn't occur in Germany. Those are just statistical anomalies. Statistical anomalies occur, but this did occur. Let's see if this is a statistical anomaly on the Trump lawfare. So, New York, People versus Trump, 34 felony counts of him falsifying business records. I thought that story was BS from the very beginning. And getting a prosecutor to create these ridiculous charges against him are just nonsense. And yet, guilty verdict May 30, 2024. I think this is a very bad example of the American legal system in chaos. And I've spoken about that before as an attorney targeted by the state of Missouri. And I don't practice. I'm a suspended attorney eternally until I agree to say that I stole from my clients, which I will never do, and which they have not even responded to my request. So we'll get to that in a different story. There's going to be an update on that as I continue to pursue, let's call it justice on that end against somebody, but they're a bunch of criminals that run the Missouri bar. Let's talk about what else happened to Trump aside from people in New York versus Trump on these 34 felony counts. He was sentenced. He was unconditionally discharged, no jail, no probation, and Trump still appealed it, which he should. Who cares anymore, really? But maybe he doesn't want to have that on his. If he could be a felon, they could have prevented him before from being on the ballot, apparently. So DC interference in federal election interference. Charges were conspiracy to defraud the U.S., obstruction, all related to January 6th, which I also believe to be BS created. This was paused after the Supreme Court immunity ruling in July of 2024, and prosecution was narrowed to something else. No trial is set. JR's program, he's a far bigger expert on this than I am. I'm just passing them, what happened to the old Trumpster. But if you listen to JR's show, he knows all the details and the status of each of these. Let's see. Let's talk about the Florida classified documents when they attacked his house. That hasn't happened to any other president. They just don't do it. And the charges: espionage act, obstruction, going through his wife's underwear drawer, whatever that is. This was dismissed in July the 24th on the grounds of special counsel being appointed. And the DOJ, of course, appeals are ongoing. This is a nonsense case, needs to be gotten rid of too, in my humble opinion and legal review. Case in Georgia, this Fulton County. Got a creative prosecutor down there who was using that office for her own benefit, I believe. I believe she ought to be targeted with something to go after her for the ways she ran this. Excuse me. And this case, racketeering, conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results. DA Fannie Willis was disqualified in December of 2024, and the case is in limbo. Really needs to be dismissed, but God knows what they'll do. Hold it out there forever. They had a civil fraud case. New York AG Letitia James in this $355 million judgment. And appeals court vacated a large penalty and said it's excessive. There's appeals ongoing in that case. Jean Carroll defamation assault case. They had a verdict in 2023, which was upheld, and then there's the 83 million is on appeal. So this is what I referred to, excuse me, as Clinton-style lawfare model. There's no bullets, no car crashes, no death at the end of a lonely road somewhere. There are people that tried to kill him too. You remember, we had assassination attempts against him. And endless courtroom battles, billion-dollar liability cases, headlines that attempt to bury you long before voters get to see a ballot. So there's in America, it's very alive and well to have Clinton-style lawfare attacks destroying your political enemies, which for the course of my lifetime have been growing, not being reduced. People used to talk about the effect of trade unions. Remember when I talk about the Missouri nonpartisan is what they like to call it. You have to throw that word in. But the Missouri nonpartisan judicial appointment plan, the reason they always list as that coming into play is corruption. They say it's corruption. It's because unions on either side of Missouri were corrupt, and each were battling each other to get the say in who got appointed to important positions. And so instead, they created this nonpartisan judicial plan to appoint judges for big cities, for the appellate courts, for the Supreme Court, and that sort of thing. And that plan is still in use today from alleged corruption, but the corruption is now all in the Missouri bar. All they did was move corruption to a different place. If you think they're not controlled by something, by parties, by ideology, by something, and they get to make the choice of who gets to hold Supreme Court positions, you're definitely wrong. It's not a system that is based upon anything remotely similar to public, what would I call it? Public need. The broader, anybody that's possibly looking out for the public, they are not. They are looking out for maintaining the power in the same old places where it's always been. And Missouri are the experts at keeping it controlled in the deep state and keeping it controlled by the same puppet masters, that are behind the power of the Supreme Court, and they are in the Missouri bar. So that is what our lawfare is like in Missouri, and I definitely believe that that exists. This Clinton, that is the Clinton-style lawfare of destroying your enemies with the power accumulated by you and your cohorts in the state, and it's designed to one hand wash the other and keep that power in the same old places that it always was, in the same old clubs that it always is. Now, I also wanted to take at some well known U.S. candidate death. Remember, the point of this show is whether good people will ever run for office or not, or whether they want to have these things in the background. So the analysis would be, I think I'm going to run for, uh, I don't know, a county commissioner. I'm going to run for the county commissioner and be the like Ike Skelton. You're going to run for it, but what do you get in return? You make a decision that you think is in the best interest of the county that elected you, and another county official charges you with a crime, or ensures that you are charged with a crime in the form of Rochelle Christensen. Nonsense. What her activities were in that case, I think, are BS, and she shouldn't have done it. But she's deep in there, and she'll be one of those people that'll go, "Oh, geez, I was just doing my job and doing what I thought was right." No, you were targeting a person, and that is what is going on. If it was equal treatment for everyone, I'd feel different about it, but I do not. So let's go over to U.S. candidate deaths. Let's take the far extreme death of candidates running for office. One of the most famous, of course, is Robert F. Kennedy, who was 42, killed in 1968. He was a Democrat Party presidential candidate. He was married to a lady named Ethel and had 11 children. His platform, he was very much anti-Vietnam War. He was pro-civil rights and creating some sort of poverty programs. He was shot on June the 5th, 1968 at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, and he died on June the 6th. Now, people are much more likely to believe nowadays that this was, the investigation gave us a convicted guy. Sirhan was convicted, and his parole was repeatedly denied. I don't know the status where he is. He probably passed away in court, or in prison, I mean, by this time. But this is a famous case. And if you don't believe that there were some deep state activity in there, to me, that seems a little bit iffy. One from, and I lived in Missouri uh, at later, while his wife was running, had gotten the position because he was elected posthumously. Guy named Mel Carnahan, age 66. He was the Missouri governor. And he was married to Jean, who became the uh, uh, person that held office in his stead. Had 3 children, Rob and Russ Randy. Platform, he was a moderate Democrat, believed in healthcare and education. His death was October 16 of 2000. He crashed in his Piper Aerostar with his son Randy and an aide named Chris Sifford. The NTSB blamed pilot disorientation on the death. Carnahan was elected posthumously, and his wife Jean was appointed to serve in his position. So you can think what you want. I'm only giving you the statistics on this. We had Kennedy, Robert, shot. We had Mel Carnahan, died, this 32 years later, I suppose. Another famous one, guy named Paul Wellstone, who was age 58. He was a U.S. Senator from Minnesota, died in 2002. He was married, had a bunch of kids. He was a progressive populist, believed in labor, health care. He opposed the Iraq War, and he died on October 25th, 2022, again in a plane crash. King Air A100 crashed near Eveleth, Minnesota. NTSB cites pilot error. Now, these plane crashes get to be a little bit worrying, right? Here's Hale Boggs, for example, age 58, House Majority Leader from Louisiana, and Nick Begich, age 40. He represented Alaska. They both died in 1972. And the family, Boggs was married to Linda. Begich was married, 6 children, including a future senator named Mark Begich. And he died again on October 16, 1972. His 310 Cessna disappeared in Alaska and was never found. Okay. It'd be interesting to go back and talk just about this. It was a massive search. Everybody presumes that they're all dead, how that were on the plane, but there's 2 people. Here's another Missouri case, a guy named Jerry Litton in 1976, who was a candidate for the U.S. Senate. He was married to somebody named Sharon. Everybody died in a crash. He was a Reformed Democrat. August 3, 1976, his plane crashed after his primary victory speech. And here they cite aircraft failure. Tell you what, if you're somebody running for office, you're probably better off not riding in a plane, right? You probably don't want that. We've had Mel Carnahan, plane crash. Wellstone, plane crash. Boggs, plane crash. Litton, plane crash. Richard Obenschrein, age 43, a Virginia GOP Senate nominee in 78, married with 3 children, a conservative Republican, died August 2nd in a plane crash in 1978. So crazy stuff. Now here's one that is statistically probably irrelevant, but somebody named Stephanie Tubbs, so here's your leveling theory that says, well, statistics, here's a statistic for you. A widow with 1 son, platform was Democrat, Judiciary Committee member, though, died on August 20, 2008 of a cerebral aneurysm. Now, that isn't something you can point out and say, hey, gee, somebody offed them, but all the plane crashes, it just seems a bit suspicious to me. And here's a person named Jackie Walorski, age 58, Indiana Republican. This one occurred in 2022. Married, no children, Republican, conservative, died on August 3, 2022 in a head-on crash. The investigation showed that her vehicle crossed a center line during a passing, an attempt to pass someone. So probably, just an unfortunate accident. So a guy named, here's the last one we'll talk about, guy from Iowa named Doug Buttsier, who is age 59. He was a Libertarian Senate candidate from Iowa, married with 3 children, died. He was fiscal discipline. He wanted, to control, people's money and talk about civil liberties, very a libertarian approach. And he died on October 13. A lot of people dying in October, leading up to elections in plane crashes, don't you think? And he died again in a plane crash, single pilot aircraft, small plane, in other words. And he died in a crash at Dubuque. So plane crashes, mostly. Assassinations, Kennedy. Aneurysms are rare, but real. Plane crashes are supposed to be rare, but it makes you wonder, when people are dying on these. I suppose you could take the point of view that if you're a candidate and you have, call it 6 months leading up to an election, which is usually in November. So you got what? April to November would be a 6-month period. And suppose you fly daily once or twice during that period. You have the opportunity for, call it 200 to 300 flights during that time period if you're busy campaigning and flying from one place to the next. Maybe, if you look at it in that point of view, the statistical impact of 300 flights is worse. But if we asked our Grok or our Chat GPT, what is the statistical likelihood of a plane crash? In fact, let's ask that question. What is the statistical likelihood of a plane crash per 1,000 flights, let's say? And so Grok is thinking for me even now. And this could be interesting. Ready? To determine the statistical, I'm going to read it because I don't know. So it just came up, right? To determine the statistical likelihood of a plane crash per 1,000 flights, we can draw on available data from provided reference focusing on relevant and recent statistics in commercial and general aviation. The likelihood varies significantly depending on whether you're considering a commercial flight or general aviation, which includes private recreational charters. So we're going to say not commercial, but for commercial, the data suggests that plane crashes are extremely rare. In a 2024 report, there were 46 aviation incidents out of 40.6 million flights, and only 7 resulted in death. That means one accident per 883,000 flights. And for fatals, it's one fatal accident in 5.8 million flights. So basically, to express this as 1,000, what did they come up with? It's a very small number, which I don't really care about. I prefer the one per this amount, right? And that is what it is for commercial. If you go to general aviation, and these are not my numbers, these are Grok numbers that come up. And here it says, in general aviation, which includes private and recreational, there's a higher accident rate. Of course, according to the National Transportation Safety Board from 2007, there were 6.84 accidents per 100,000 flight hours, with 1.9 fatal accidents per 100,000 flight hours. More recent data from 2023 indicates general aviation had a fatal accident rate of 0.762 per 100,000 flight hours. So converting flight hours is challenging without precise data, but they say accidents per flight, which is how I wanted it. If you assume one flight equals 1.5 hours on average, 100,000 flight hours equals 600. Well, this is pretty cool what they've done for me. 66,667 flights. Thus, 6.84 accidents per 100 flight hours equals, and then they go through the part. And so your chances per 1,000 flights is 0.1026 accidents per 1,000 flights, or a 10.26 chance of an accident. That sounds extremely high in a small aircraft, does it not? So if it's a 10.26 chance of an accident, these numbers can't be accurate. Now a fatal accident is quite a bit less. Fatal accident per 1,000 flights, blah blah blah, equals per 1,000 flights a 1% chance of a fatal crash in 1,000 flights. That's the number I wanted to get. So if you assume that these estimates suggest general aviation has a significantly higher crash rate, obviously, and the likelihood of dying on a small aircraft is a hell of a lot higher than dying on a commercial craft, but it's still pretty slow. So if you look at the primary data, of course, is there. The final answer down below, Grok gives the final answer that says the likelihood of a plane crash. Maybe we should ask Gabby Hayes on this. He's always talking about aircraft and what all that is. Maybe he has a show on Damn Radio too. Maybe we should get him on here and talk to him about it, because he worked as an air traffic controller for a long time and knows some of these things, and he always wants to talk about it. He's been talking about the significant increase in that on quite a few of the shows that I have listened to that Gabby puts on weekly basis. And by the way, if you want to go back and listen to Gabby Hayes shows, you can find them damradio.com/podcasts, and all of our prior shows from Damn Radio are listed out there. Mine on International Flavor are also listed out there, but they are also listed on internationalflavor.com because I saved them all as podcasts later. But the final answer that Grok came up with for people that are dying in aircraft crashes seems to be, if you looked at those that are dying in, what would be really interesting would be to go back and find the number of candidates and see if there's a statistical correlation between being a candidate and your plane crashing, or being a famous person and your plane crashing. Because if you're looking at this 1,000 flights and the average flight being 1.5 hours, obviously there's a lot of play that you could play around with some of these numbers. And if you're all in state, the likelihood is not that it's going to be an hour and a half flight, that it'll be a much less flight. When I had a friend that used to fly me places in his small plane, we would go from Jefferson City or Columbia or wherever to other places, generally in Missouri. Once we flew to Florida, if I can, for a case that we had down there, but most of the time it was flying very local. And the flight from Jefferson City to St. Louis took less than 40 minutes, so maybe the hour and a half is off a little bit, and the numbers are actually lower because there are more flights that are taking less, especially if these candidates are flying around the state of Iowa, like one of them was doing, or any of the other ones. The two that were flying together from different states, the senators that died in Alaska, their plane disappeared in Alaska. Who knows? But these would be interesting statistics for Gabby to explain to us, perhaps. But the final answer that Grok gives is that the likelihood of a plane crash per 1,000 flights is pretty tiny, with fatal crashes is even more tiny, 0.172 or lower. And that's in commercial side. In general aviation, it's quite a bit higher, and a 1.785 chance at a fatal accident per 1,000 flights. So call it 2 out of 1,000 or 1 in 500 flights. And so if you compare that to the people who have been eliminated from running for office that we were going through before, with all of these people that died in plane crashes, like I said, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Mel Carnahan, the Missouri governor running for U.S. Senate, died in a plane crash. Paul Wellstone, U.S. Senate, ran 2002, died in a plane crash. Hale Boggs, running for, he was a House Majority Leader, rerunning or campaigning with Nick Begich, who was a representative in Alaska. Both of them died in a plane crash. Jerry Litton died in a crash. His whole family died with him, on that one. And that happened in 1976 after his primary victory speech. And everybody died in what they claim is aircraft failure. I don't say that it's not. I'm just saying statistically, this is odd. Richard Obensheim, 43, Missouri, Virginia, GOP senator, died in a plane crash. Jackie Walorski in Indiana, that was a car crash, and that one probably nothing to it. But finally, another plane crash, single pilot, Dubuque, Iowa, Doug Butts here. I don't know. Those are interesting for us, whether you find that statistically relevant or not. So the two things that we have discussed so far are that, all of this is related to the dangers of running for office in various countries. And in Germany, we had probably an anomaly that nothing conspiracy should be generated from paying attention to those sorts of reviews, if you want to call them that, of statistics based upon people dying. Those, none of them seem too out of the ordinary, except 4 of the 7 were sudden death, people who died, all 4 of them, of heart attack or extreme, death. If you believe in the US form of movie where they give somebody a pill in their drink or inject them with something and it blows up their heart lining or something like that, and they die, perhaps you could come up with a theory on that, but no doctor has supported anything like that, calling each of these a natural death or a death by natural causes, just happened to be sudden of the 4. The other 3, not so. There was an old man who died of a long-standing condition. There was a liver issue, and then suicide. So that probably not statistically relevant. Then we talked about the Trump lawfare issues, and then we went to people dying in plane crashes. Okay, these, whether they're statistically relevant or not, it is dangerous to run for office sometimes, don't you think? And so it is quite interesting to me to go through all of the numbers, and then you personalize it, because that's what we do. We always personalize it. And before I get to the Ukraine segment, which is frankly alarming, no matter how you slice it, when you get to the Ukraine section of Ukraine style democracy, if you want to call it that, is death to everyone. And everybody gets to yell Slava Ukraini and death Ostalnim. And Smert Ostalnim is how that would translate. And everybody always forgets to add that part when they say it, but that's how the saying goes. When these people are running around, I saw it in a Uber car. I saw it on somebody's window in uh, last week in Lithuania, in Vilnius. I saw something that said Slava Ukraini, and that is, to me, I'm a person who knows what goes after that, and I think it. I think posting that is more of a threat than saying anything positive. I don't like it. And I don't like to hear that, because I actually know the next statement that goes along with it. And Slava Ukraini. If people are saying it, you know that they are thinking the next part, which is death to everyone else. Grace to Ukraine, death to everybody else. And I don't like it. And but historically, that has been how it is reviewed. They are a brutal bunch over there. And I'm not saying Ukrainians are alone. I think Eastern Europeans think differently than the rest of us, and they're somewhat extreme. So when we get into that, which is going to be here in a minute, I think you need to take it from that point of view. I'm not sure I'd ever run for office in Ukraine or any country like it. And Ukraine is, there's a reason they haven't been allowed into NATO historically. There's corruption is rampant. Death of political members is rampant. Uh, Control of the state is presumed by certain actors, and whether you believe in, calling it democracy or not, more power to you. But don't make the mistake of thinking that democracy is alive and well in Ukraine, and that is what people are trying to defend against the big bad wolf of Russia, because that is not the case. Mm-hmm. Sorry, sip of coffee there. Hmm. The interesting part, I think, is I mean, not that I'm not interested in what we've covered so far. I think it's been very interesting all the way through to check out statistics, to check out, and remember, these questions are democracy related. Are you going to run for office? Are you going to put your hat in the ring if your plane's going to crash? Are you going to put your hat in the ring if they attack you like they attacked Donald Trump? Are you going to put your hat in the ring anywhere related to Ukraine? Probably a mistake. You better have some pretty big defense capabilities if you're in Ukraine and you're wanting to proceed and go and get into the big political world. Not sure I'd want to there. So let's talk about Ukraine, and I'm going to call this part of it: bullets, bans, benches, judges, and billions of dollars. because this place is corrupt as the day is long. There's been talks all over America. Do you remember Burisma? Do you remember Joe Biden going over in 2014? Do you remember the Maidan uh, replacement of government? Do you remember these uprisings? Do you remember what happened? Did we even know? Nobody knew. And in uh, February of 2022, when the Russians had had enough, and now I'm not saying they aren't guilty of certain things in the Donbass area as well, but I don't believe that they are anywhere near as bad of activities as there were on the Ukrainian side in attempting to control those areas that didn't want to stay part of Ukraine. I still believe that the separatism and the wanting a referendum to exit the country east of the Donbass is a very likely scenario. Most of the people on the east side of the Donbass are Russian nationality, Russian speaking, not Ukrainian, and I believe that's true all the way through Nikolaev and through Odessa regions as well. So there's been a lot of talk in the last week or so, and last 2 weeks or so, including a picture that showed those two regions highlighted similar to all the eastern ones in the office of a very high ranking Russian general staff military that showed those two regions shaded as well, as this is what we're doing. I've said for at least 3 years now, quite a bit longer probably, that I believe that Russia would be, I don't want to use the word justified, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't be unreasonable for them to say that no, Odessa's Russian, Odessa's been Russian, Odessa will always be Russian, and same with Nikolaev, and then attach, as I've said quite a few times, all the way to Transnistria, which is the eastern half of Ukraine that got the ability to be a separate political organization as well. And if Russia could connect with Transnistria, then the part that becomes Russia, I mean, even if it's a corridor that goes through, something like that, because Russia has two sorts of, how would we call it, brotherhood states, if you want to call it that, or brotherhood territories that are very strong and Russian, want to be part of Russia and have military ties to Russia. Kaliningrad up on the Baltic Sea, and Transnistria, which is attached to Moldova and wants to be part of Russia from the times of the USSR collapsing. And so these are things that we in the West, as I talked about in one of my shows last week, we have zero control over these sorts of nationalist, or let's call them European shifting borders, because their borders have shifted all over the freaking place for hundreds of years. And we're never going to change that. The borders are, and U.S. has nothing, or should have nothing, to do with any of that. We should let Europe handle its own BS. It has nothing to do with us. And there's no way in hell that we should be funding it. But we do. And why? Because we like our corruption. We like it when Joe Biden goes over and his son owns one of the largest shares of one of the largest corporations in Ukraine that is set to, be used in 2014 for exactly all these things before Joe Biden was even president. His son is traveling with him. That is completely wrong and BS for him to go to Ukraine and create little things on the sidelines of meetings that are occurring with Biden, and Biden then get up and say, well, we're going to withhold billions if you don't prosecute or get rid of this prosecutor who's targeting people that we like. He's very proud of it. And this is what we have in Ukraine. We have corruption and a government that is perfectly willing to sign up to be rich oligarchs on their own, whether it's funded by the Biden administration, by U.S. Agency for International Development, by National Endowment for Democracy, or any of these other uh, NGO sorts of things that are pushed by people like Joe Biden and his son uh, uh, toward Burisma or anywhere else in Ukraine. So it's very, very political, and death is far more likely. I don't mean to laugh about it, but death is far more likely in Ukraine if you're going to interfere with the standard corrupt government practices that occur in Ukraine. Okay, so let's have a look at, just for fun. It's not fun; it's depressing. Let's look at political related killing and death in this next segment of Ukraine. Bullets, bans, benches, and billions. Here we go. The political killings and death. Let's start with 1996. An MP from Donetsk named Yevshin Sherbun was shot dead at the airport with his wife and bodyguard. Everybody killed in a contract style hit linked to gas industry war. So killed politically. That's definitely one of them. And just shot at the airport, not a plane crash, but heck, maybe we couldn't sabotage the plane and have him die, so there wouldn't be any question. We just gun him down. So it's not unlikely in Ukraine. Let's put it that way. And it occurs if we do a search through Grok or ChatGPT or any of those related to this guy and try to find the story. I ran that a little bit earlier. Let's see if I can find the page where it is listed for me, because I did a quick search in Google of him and it shows, oops, wrong one. Where is he? We want this Yevshin Shurban in Donetsk, killed at the airport. That's the one we want. And let's get the news on that. And him and his wife, Nadezhda, let's see. He was a Ukrainian businessman and politician, a member of the Liberal Party of Ukraine. He was elected to the Verkhovna Rada from the Volnovakha electoral district in Donetsk, and he served as the People's Deputy of Ukraine from 94 till he was assassinated in 96. And his death, him and his wife, Nadezhda, were shot dead on the runway at Donetsk Airport on the 3rd of November, 1996, several men posing as public officers. The killers, among them, were a guy named Vadim Bolotsky, Gennady Zangalidi, and others. Prosecutors have stated the murder was intended to eliminate competition for the control of the natural gas industry. In 2002, 8 men were arrested and tried for this murder. All of them were found guilty. 3 are serving life sentences. The event took place soon after replacement of the governor of Donetsk Oblast, Volodymyr Sherbyan, with the former Minister of Coal Industry, Sergei Polyakov, and the appointment of Viktor Yanukovych to the position of deputy chairman. So all of these are connected. Former Ukraine Prime Minister Pavlo Lazarenko was implicated in the murder by the Prosecutor General of Ukraine later, and then he was fired from office. I mean, this is all clear politics, and so people are dying because of that. And so when you talk about the start of Ukraine, it was what, 1991 when they were granted independence from Russia or Commonwealth of Independent States, or however you want to put it. And this one, it's this is I don't want to say he's the start. Other people died, as well. But he's the first one because it seems to get worse as you go along. Next one's a guy named Vadim Hetman, who's a former member of the Ukraine Parliament, first chairman of National Bank of Ukraine, and he was assassinated in Kiev in April 1998. He was shot and killed by professional hitmen in the elevator of his apartment building. This is movie crap, people. This is movie related stuff. And in 2003, 5 years later, the assassin Sergei Kulyov was sentenced to life in prison. And then, according to the prosecutor general of Ukraine, the assassination was ordered and paid for by former Prime Minister Pavlo Lazarenka. Remember him? Because people were saying that he was also attached to this Yevgeny Sherbin death before. And of course, he denies responsibility. If you're in power, you don't have to worry about that. Some observers at the time believe the murder was a contract killing intended to deter foreign investment in Ukraine. They don't want that. They want Ukrainians to be able to keep it for themselves. And so it's not really, I don't know, but he was a top banker and he was killed off, contract killing. And that is unbelievable, and this is Ukraine. Don't go thinking that these are individuals, because we haven't even gotten through anything on this list. And there was a guy, a journalist, okay, that his name. Let's get started with him. Journalists are being killed off. Remember, there are journalists, there are priests, there are political activists, there are industry leaders. This is Ukraine for you. Okay, this is and us being involved in it. I don't know. Let them solve their own internal problems and then let us get involved. We sure as hell shouldn't be involved in this. Let's talk about Georgy Gangadze. And he is or was a Ukrainian journalist who was kidnapped and murdered in 2000. He founded the online newspaper called Ukrainskaya Pravda along with Elena Pritula in 2000. He was born in Tbilisi to a Ukrainian, that's Georgia, to a Ukrainian mother and a Georgian father. The circumstance of death became a national scandal and a focus for protest against the president of Ukraine at the time, who was Leonid Kuchma. And during the cassette scandal, audio tapes were released on which Kuchma, a guy named Volodymyr Litvin, remember that name, and other top administration officials are heard discussing the need to silence Gangadze for his online news reports about high-level corruption. Former Interior Minister Yuri Kovchenko died with 2 gunshot wounds to the head on March 4, 2005, just hours before he was to begin providing testimony as a witness in this case. Kravchenko was the superior of the 4 policemen who were charged with Gangadze's murder soon after Kravchenko's death. The ruling of suicide was doubted by media reports. 3 former officials of Ukraine Interior Minister's Foreign Surveillance Department and Criminal Intelligence accused of his murder were arrested in March 2005. And a 4th one, Alexei Pukach, the former chief of the unit in 2009, was also charged. A court in Ukraine sentenced Protasov to a sentence of 13 years and Kostenko and Popovich to 12-year terms in March 2008 for the murder of Gangadze's family. I'm sorry, for the murder of Gangadze. His family believes the trial had failed to bring the masterminds of the killings to justice. So this is journalists, but convictions may come a little bit later, but this is business as usual in Ukraine friends and neighbors. They're used to it. This is how things occur. Let's look at a guy named Mikola Shkriblyak. Some of these names are great. He was shot in a stairwell. He was the deputy governor of Ivano-Frankivsk region in Ukraine, shot and killed in the stairwell of his apartment building on the evening of March of 2002 parliamentary election, and he was a candidate for parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, at the time of his murder. And his assassination took place March 29th. He was shot at least 9 bullets. He was shot in the stairwell of his apartment building. The political context: he was a candidate for the Social Democrat Party of Ukraine. His murder occurred during a contentious election marred by allegations of fraud, corruption, and intimidation. Well, what better way to intimidate than to just kill somebody? News reports at the time suggest his death was politically motivated. The Jamestown Foundation noted that he supervised the energy sector in his region, an area with significant competition between various companies and political interests. His position was as a broker in that uh, pipeline, if you want to call it that, was inherently dangerous, according to investigators. And following his murder, President Leonid Kuchma again instructed an investigation by prosecutors, police, in secret, and nothing has really come of that. They have never found anybody to be guilty. Isn't that crazy? So there's another candidate. Let's go talk about another journalist that they this is how you take care of things in Ukraine. You tell you what, you running for office in Ukraine, maybe you do have a death wish, or maybe you're on the side of the people who aren't there. But my thought process would be, if you got to join the Antichrist in order to participate in the, what do you call it, administration of your country's government, perhaps you're better off not doing that, because if they're with you now, there's nothing that says they can't be against you tomorrow. Isn't that right? That's a true possibility. And so running for office is a is a dangerous proposition in Ukraine, or even being a journalist. It's nonsense. This one, guy named Oles Buzina, Ukrainian. He was born, in Ukraine, and he's a Ukrainian journalist and writer, well known for his criticism of Ukrainian politics and for supporting closer ties between Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Being pro-Russia is a very bad thing in Ukraine. He was found killed by gunshot on the 16th of April 2015 near his residence in Kiev, and his murder remains unsolved. That's how it is. These people, if you're pro-Russia, you die, and or they cut you off some other way. They figure out how to silence your voice. Let's talk about a guy named Pavel Sheremet, who's a Belarusian-born investigative journalist known for his critical reporting. He was killed by a car bomb in Kiev on July 20th of 2016. Multiple suspects were charged. Their trials were suspended due to their service in the Ukrainian military, and the case remains officially unsolved. How about that? Concerns about failures in the investigation and a huge threat to freedom of press in Ukraine. There is no freedom of press in Ukraine, by the way. He was known for investigating corruption, violence by volunteer battalions, those high-level nationalists, and other topics considered uncomfortable for authorities. And nothing is completely unresolved. The investigation has been criticized for no transparency, no progress, no. Some rights groups and international organizations want a full and effective investigation. They're never gonna get it, and this case highlights, how business is really conducted in Ukraine. again, what business does United States have defending this type of democracy, if you want to call it that? And if you're pro-Russian, forget it. You will die, or you'll be taken out in other ways, which we'll get into in a little bit, because they have party bans, they have other stuff as well. So there's a guy, Ilya Kiva, on December 6, 2023. Former Ukrainian MP Ilya Kiva was shot and killed in a park in Odintsova region, a suburb southwest of Moscow. Kiva, who fled Ukraine before Russia upped the ante in the Donbass, he was considered a traitor by Ukrainian authorities for his pro-Kremlin stance and what they called his propaganda. The State Security Service, SBU, of Ukraine was reported by anonymous sources to have orchestrated this assassination, and that they are involved. The Ukrainian military intelligence spokesperson publicly stated that Kiva was done and hinted that other traitors are going to face a similar fate. At the time of his death, Kiva was wanted by Ukraine on charges of high treason, and he'd been sentenced in absentia to 14 years in prison. So this incident is part of a series of events targeting Russian and pro-Russian figures, suggesting that Ukrainian security services always have assets operating within Russia and basically everywhere else too. These are serious players. The Ukrainians, they are serious, and death is a possibility if you disagree with their, or even if you say anything, pro-Russia, right? But don't go claiming that we in America are defending democracy in Ukraine. You don't know crap about what you're talking about if you truly believe that, because they are corrupt mofos, corrupt people. So let's go on to the next one. In December 2023, Ukrainian lawmaker Kieva, which we discussed, he was done. And then right after him, there was somebody, this one, another, I believe this is another journalist. Let's get into it for here in a second. Nope, XMP. And the reports from 2023, no, hold on. We got the wrong dude here. That's still Ilya Kiva. I have to get to the right page for Irina. Because what have we done so far? We've done how many deaths to Ukrainian journalists, MPs, and spokespersons? What do we got here? 9 so far. And here's the next one. Here's this one is a Ukrainian nationalist ex-MP who got shot in Lvov, right? This one, a former Ukrainian nationalist, died after being shot on the street. Once again, this is Irina Farion, who caused controversy in 2023, said that true patriots of Ukraine should not speak Russian under any circumstances. So I think it's nonsense, and I've talked about that on some of my shows, speaking Russian. It'd be like saying in America, you can't speak, don't speak Mexican, you can't speak Spanish, right? That's nonsense. And there's a lot of people who believe that when I was growing up and would say that, you come to America, you better speak English. I think, I never cared then, don't care now what language you want to use. It'd be nice if I could talk to you. That would be nice. And so I dislike this. You can't speak Russian. You can't watch Russian TV. Nothing in Russia can be good because the countries have a dispute with Ukraine. Bullshit. And that's just completely wrong. But this 60-year-old linguistic professor was killed, and it was being investigated. Police say it was targeted. She's a former MP. Her attacker was not identified. She died in the hospital. On Telegram, the region head, Maxim Kotsitsky, said that she died in a hospital after the shooting. This was not a spontaneous killing. Police are looking for motive. Well, the main one I can say are her social and political activities and personal dislikes, he said in a statement. We do not rule out that the murder has a commissioned character, meaning somebody hired it on. These These are people who are dying in Ukraine. And what is she, number 9 or 10? We had some more recent, um, what do you call them, assassinations that occurred, which we'll get to in just a second. And but that is political life in Ukraine. And let's talk about August 30, 2025. This one was just occurred here, and he was a former speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, right? And he was assassinated. A guy named Andrei Parubi was assassinated at noon on August 30. A gunman disguised as a delivery courier shot him multiple times in the street in Lvov and then fled the scene on an electric bicycle. He died at the scene from his injuries, did our esteemed Andrei Parubi. A suspect has been identified as 52-year-old resident Mikhail Seltsin, Selnikov, there you go, Selnikov, who was arrested in Khmelnytsky region on September 1st. He admitted to the murder but claimed it was an act of personal revenge against Ukrainian authorities because his son went missing at the front. He stated he wanted to be included in a prisoner exchange with Russia to find his son's body, but Ukrainian officials, including national police, suggest instead Russian involvement in the assassination. It's compared to the killing of another nationalist, the one I just talked about, Irina Farion, in Lvov in July 2024. Some experts view these murders as part of Russian strategy to destabilize Ukraine. So, if you're involved in politics in Ukraine, your likelihood of death is up because, first of all the corrupt people running Ukraine are killing people that are against them, and then allegedly now we have people from the Russian deep services killing off people that are pro-Ukrainian. Allegedly, they all are pointing fingers at each other. The point is, you don't want to be running for office in what they call a democratic Ukraine. You certainly, sure as hell, don't want to be a journalist over there. These people are targeted like crazy. How many did I view for you so far that we've come to? And I want to get to another one who died in custody in Ukraine, and this was a U.S. and Chilean um, citizen. He wasn't even a Ukrainian citizen. All he was a journalist, a vocal journalist, saying things that they didn't like to hear. And the guy's a blogger. He was pretty famous, and his name was Gonzalo Lira, and he had U.S. and Chilean. I believe he had both. He was a dual passport holder, if I remember. But he was a blogger, and he was pretty much a pro-Russian commentator. I suppose, uh, like me, he speaks what he believes to be the truth about this entire affair and says what he believes the truth. Well, if words hurt you and you got to kill people to shut up words, that means those people are right. So, whatever you believe about the security service or about what happened with Gonzo Lira, the fact that he was a pro-Russian commentator, we have at least in that list of 1, 2, 3, 10, 12 people that we put out, Gonzalo Lira is a real. I mean, this guy was offed for sure. And his political stance, he had been living in Kharkiv, Ukraine. He talked pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian view, and he was accused of everybody says he was accused of, if you're pro-Russian, you're supplying what they call Russian disinformation, meaning information that you disagree with. That anything that you disagree with worldwide, you can tie to Russian disinformation. If it's anything that isn't negative or defamatory of Russia or anyone associated with Russia, then it is Russian disinformation. That is the world in which we live, right? He was arrested and detained by the Security Service of Ukraine in April 2022 and again in May of 2023. He was charged with, here are the charges, producing and publishing materials justifying Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine, which is a crime. So if you say anything that justifies Russia's position in coming after them, it is a crime in Ukrainian law. Okay, so you say, wait a minute, this war is because of the West pumping Ukraine full of military materials, or perhaps even having bio labs put in Ukraine, or talking to senators like I did several years ago, talking to U.S. senators, or I'm sorry, U.S. House of Representative people on the radio and going, wait a minute, NATO doesn't have anything in Ukraine, they say. She goes, no, 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 I've been to those bases since 2014. Where we denied that NATO was expanding, but then the U.S. is putting mini bases up there for senators and representatives to visit, and they're talking about it on the radio with me. This is nonsense. And so now that is a crime, and that's the crime that Gonzalo Lira was accused of. He produced and published materials justifying Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine, a crime under Ukrainian law. Let's talk about the allegations of death and neglect. His cause of death, he died in a Kharkiv hospital on January 12th, 2024. He was 55. A letter he wrote from prison detailed severe health issues that he had, double pneumonia, pneumothorax, and edema, which he claimed were being neglected. And he died as a result of these things. And Lira's father, Gonzalo Lira Sr., said his son's death was unjustified, and he accused Ukraine of torture and neglect, holds Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Joe Biden responsible because the State Department did nothing but confirm his death, and later said he died of illness that could have resulted from neglect or improper treatment. That's it for the U.S. Russian officials, including Maria Zakharova and Sergei Lavrov, who I like to listen to both, maybe that makes me a Russian puppet, they echoed the accusations of torture and neglect for this guy dying in prison. You shouldn't die of pneumonia in a Ukrainian prison when you have views that aren't even necessarily against Ukraine. Maybe they're just not enough anti-Russia, which is what you have to do in Ukraine in order to be successful. Some Ukrainian officials and commentators deny torture. One former journalist turned Ukrainian sergeant says that Lira's claims were an attempt to gain sympathy. Maybe I should be allowed to say things that are pro-Russia. Either way, there is no freedom of speech in Ukraine. Don't go think that there is, because there isn't. You say anything anti-Ukraine or even pro-Russia, then you're definitely a target. Don't go to Ukraine, right? Lira's death has been used. So now they say that the Russian side, Ukraine, and a lot of Google say that Russian officials are using these commentators, including Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and now me, to promote anti-Ukraine narratives and alleged politically motivated murder. Now, I say that you have a better duty to, or a stronger duty to, take care of the people that you have taken into custody and cannot care for themselves. I've believed that since I went after the Missouri governor's office, the executive office, for many, many times for neglect of inmates or for the rape of women in jail by their guards. I did that type of law for many years, going after those types of people. And so when Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, or anybody else says that these are politically motivated, it's more you shouldn't. You should have a higher duty to care for somebody who's what do you call it, under your care and custody, and take care of him more than you would, not less. You should be protecting what he says to keep his rights. That is what alleged democracy is supposed to be. At the least of those people, you take them into custody, you bought whatever problems they have, and you need to make sure that they are taken care of because they can't take care of them themselves. And so if the guy's got pneumonia, you need to know about it and get him treated for it. So, you can agree to or disagree on that topic. You could say, well, they're inmates and screw them. They committed a crime. They committed a crime. They haven't been. He wasn't even charged. I mean, he was charged, but that's all. He was in pretrial detention, which is different than an inmate who's finally been found guilty. He wasn't found guilty of any of this. Now he's dead, and it's presumed that he was guilty of all of these things, and he died rightly so. And these people, including Google, say that it's used by Western commentators like Carlson and Elon Musk to say that Ukraine are bad people. I don't say they're bad people. I said they had a stronger duty to take care of this guy. Lear's family and supporters want an independent investigation, but as of today, no such animal. That's not happening. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about those sorts of things, but there's another part that, again, still in Ukraine, with party bans. Ukraine is not the place where you believe where democracy exists. And remember, the title of this, or not the title, the thrust of this broadcast, the thrust of my 3-hour deep dive, which will appear live on, well, not live, but this pre-recorded show will be on mydamnradio.com/live on Sunday night, because I'll be traveling. I'm doing this show a little bit early, also live, but through my Podbean. But it's going to be, again, broadcast on Sunday night in my deep dive. And the thrust of this is, remember, clearing the field, the political field, and death and lawfare in political campaigns, which occur all over the place. Ukraine is just the worst offender right now, in my opinion, or the most known or most obvious offender in my mind right now. This is a way of life for them in politics, and democracy, that's a joke over there. Don't go believing that any of this is democracy related remotely. So we've covered the death of candidates dying in Germany, which I don't believe anything. That's just a statistical anomaly, most likely. We talked about Trump being beaten up by lawfare, and now we've gone through Ukraine's journalist silence, parties banned, leaders jailed. And I want to go further into that even now. So parties that get banned under Ukrainian law is still going on. How many parties have they banned under martial law? These are people who it's illegal to have a party of this type. So you got to clear the field so that Zelensky or his cohorts or any of them can stay in office. And how do you do that? You ban political parties and make it a crime to have this party. And so there's an opposition platform for life, which is the largest opposition bloc, has 44 MPs. And now the party's been dissolved. I mean, that's rich, isn't it? That's what democracy is all about. Let's go out and that'd be, here we are in America, right? And what do you call it? The libertarians get a very small percentage. I think the most a third party candidate has ever got is still under 10%, nothing major. And that was like Ross Perot or something. And I don't remember the specific numbers. I haven't looked them up, but let's take a small but rising party. If Elon Musk ever created a party and it really did address just people that are middle of the road and hate all politicians or what they stand for and hate the two-party system, I'd be all about it. I'd jump in, and hell, why not throw your hat in the ring for something like that? Why wouldn't you? Because we have a corrupt two-party system, but everywhere else in the world, they have corrupt multi-party systems. And that is what they're dealing with. Well, under Ukrainian law, especially under martial law, here's who they've banned since 2022 under martial law. This is Zelensky, in other words. This is them getting rid of these parties and making it a crime to belong to these parties and say that these parties cannot exist in Ukraine. And where are they? And so this is what we're fighting for if we're supporting Ukraine as Americans or as Westerners, right? We're the opposition platform for life is the biggest, 44 MPs already. That was blocked. The party of Shari, Nashi, which means ours, that is our party, that has been banned and dissolved. There's something called the opposition bloc. There's something called left opposition. The union of leftist forces, Derzhava, has been liquidated or dissolved as well. The Progressive Socialist Party of Ukraine, dissolved. Socialist Party of Ukraine, dissolved. The socialists are dissolved, and the Vladimir Saldo bloc has been dissolved. Those are 11 opposition parties that have been banned just since 2022. It's a big deal, people. This is not democracy. Okay. And so don't go believe in that. And this show is overall talking about what it means to be a candidate for any country in the world. The attacks against Trump, BS. The current attacks that people are using for lawfare against others in publications are wrong. My friend Ike Skelton, people targeting him for a BS charge and creating something that isn't what the intent was of any of it in an effort to destroy him politically, which is the only justification you can believe for that, is wrong. I don't like these things. Now let's talk about leaders in Ukraine again. We're still on Ukraine that have been jailed or exiled. Okay, and some of them killed, as we've already described. They would flee the country and then end up dead in a Moscow suburb on the street, shot. So the opposition leaders that have been jailed or exiled, Ukraine, let's talk about Viktor Medvedchuk, who was arrested in 2021, charged with treason, stripped of his citizenship, and then swapped to Russia in a prisoner exchange in 2022. They definitely disagree with his stance on democracy or running of Ukraine. They definitely disagree with that. A little bit of they like to call him an oligarch, and maybe he is, but he was a pro Moscow, pro Moscow Ukrainian oligarch charged with collaborating with Russia and with treason. Okay, former MP though, charged along with 12 others of working with Russia and treason, said Ukrainian intelligence. He was Vladimir Putin's right-hand man, they accuse him of being in Ukrainian politics, said the Kiev Independent newspaper. Yeah, right. That paper is really independent. He was sent to Russia under a prisoner swap, but on the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, said that he had been charged in absentia with furthering Russia's interests to the detriment of Ukraine, and he is accused of collaboration and treason, as well as calling for state powers to be usurped, and he denies Russia as being the aggressor against Ukraine. Well, frankly, I do too. You either believe in the referendum or you don't. And, if only referenda that are going to be justified are those that the U.S. carries out in places that it wishes to influence, or Maidan-style government overthrows orchestrated by the U.S., then we've got a serious problem. And I think that looking at people like Viktor Medvedchuk, looking at the next one, Yulia Tymoshenko, who was sentenced in 2011 to 7 years for abuse of her office. Another person who, this is how you silence people in Ukraine. And again, this is how the system works in Ukraine. Now, I truly believe there's in the U.S. it doesn't always result in murder or arrest of people, but they certainly tried to with Donald Trump. But Yulia Tymoshenko was sentenced to 7 years in prison for abuse of her office, related to the 2009 Russia-Ukraine gas dispute. She was found guilty of signing, this is crazy, guilty of signing a disadvantageous gas contract with Russia while serving as prime minister, which the court said is an abuse of power. So she was sentenced to abuse of office, sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was convicted on October 11 of 2011, and now she was released later. Ukrainian parliament passed legislation to release her, which led to her release, and the conviction was later annulled by the Supreme Court of Ukraine. But politically, she's destroyed. She's gone. She's no longer a worry, right? That's Yulia Tymoshenko. This is how we deal with opposition in Ukraine and the U.S. This is what we support because we allegedly don't do such things in America. We in America, don't assassinate Robert Kennedy while he's running for office. We don't attack Trump for lawfare. We don't go after and destroy people as the Clintons did. I thought I'd do a whole segment about them as well, but I don't think we're going to get to it. So there's one more guy, Oleg Kulinich, who was arrested in 2022. He was accused of collaborating with Russian FSB, right? And he was arrested in 2022 on charge of treason and collaboration with Russia. And the allegations, they allege that he collaborated and was being overseen by Ukrainian officials who fled. Kulinich was allegedly involved in espionage and in influencing Ukrainian law enforcement and inciting treason. Prosecutors claim he knew of plans for the invasion of Crimea, but prevented the information from reaching Kiev, and he blocked communication to SBU leadership about situation in the Donbass and Crimea regions. Following his arrest, evidences collected include hundreds of documents received from an FSB computer in Moscow, and that he is a known Russian agent, right? This is considered one of the most significant spy cases between Russia and Ukraine. And so they charged this former official with treason because he has pro-Russian tendencies. We're not going to go into too many more because we have several other topics and we only have 2 hours to get this done, and we're about 15 minutes left is all. So we've got some more. Let's talk a little bit about the purging of judges in Ukraine, which also occurs. The Constitutional Court in 2021, Zelensky suspended or dismissed multiple justices after rulings that were against his anti-corruption measures. So you get dismissed. EU observers say that these dismissals are illegal. That doesn't mean they don't happen. If you don't like judges' decisions in Ukraine, you just get rid of the judge because you are under martial law and you can put whoever you want. So dozens are being investigated. Multiple arrests of judges have occurred because they're making decisions that are anti-Ukraine, especially under martial law. Talk about clearing the field. So you clear the field not only legislatively by getting rid of people that could be part of the Verkhovna Rada, but you also get rid of anybody that could rule against you in any of these activities. Then we have also the clergy being targeted. One of the biggest cases of all is this Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which they say has a Moscow Patriarchate. Now, that's because until they forced it to change its name several years ago from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, it was the Russian Orthodox Church and has always been a subordinate or a subunit of the Russian Orthodox Church led by whatever patriarchy they have in Moscow. So first, they alleged that they were working with the Russians a few years ago, and so they had to change the title from the Russian Orthodox to Ukrainian Orthodox. So under pressure, they did. And then now a law was passed last year that said the ban of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church can go forward because they are led by somebody out of Russia and not somebody out of Ukraine. So priests have been arrested for collaboration. Monasteries have been seized by the Ukrainian government, and they are definitely targeting religious outlets. And think about that. Journalists are suppressed. I've told you a few times about the disappearance on YouTube of Diana Panchenko, who had 2 million subscribers on her YouTube channel. And it was a very good show. I watched it every once in a while. I thought she put together some pretty good stuff. And it wasn't that she was anti-Ukraine, she wasn't anti-Russia. And she's Ukrainian, and she always spoke reasonably well about the desire for Ukraine to be something other than it is, which is just a corrupt hellhole that is run by people who are certainly not democratic in any stretch of the imagination. So the former TV host with News One, who was later very independent and had a great YouTube channel with 2 million subscribers, that was deleted when? August 2025, less than a month ago, after she's a treason suspect. She got notices of that and celebrated by Kiev all over the place in the information ministry. Oh, geez, we got rid of her. Why? Because her opinion differs from something that you would like the world to know. Y'all remember Scott Ritter and my interview with him a couple of months ago? And he was an ex-weapons inspector. He's a critic of what's going on in Ukraine. He was pulled off a freaking flight in the United States under the Biden administration at JFK en route to Russia. They took his passport. That whole story is on my internationalflavor.com website. Go back and look for the Ritter interview. The video of it is out on YouTube as well. I got to speak with him for an hour about that and got that entire story about how his passport was returned to him after Trump took office. It wasn't returned officially. He was able to apply again and re-get it because they said they made him outline that it was lost or stolen. Funny story. If you haven't heard it, get on my program and let's do it again. Money and corruption. This is still in Ukraine. U.S. appropriations, $113 billion to Ukraine by the end of 2023. Supposed to be by the end of 2025, $174 billion. Pentagon errors have been rampant. Misvalued equipment, creating billions of headroom for this. The Biden family's been involved, according to the Senate report in 2020, documenting Hunter Biden's Burisma conflict of interest, which never should have occurred. Oversight memos showing suspicious payments to family members in between. And everything is called Project Ukraine. And it's nonsense. In Ukraine, opposition isn't about competing. It's about survival. Political or real. Parties are banned. Leaders are jailed or shot. Priests are arrested. Judges are sacked. Journalists are silenced. Critics in the U.S. Pulled from flights. Scott Ritter. Billions flow like a business model of taking care of the political elite and the corrupt people of what do you call it? Nachalstva, leadership, if you want to call it that, of Ukraine. This is not democracy in trouble. It's a managed mafia operation. That's what this is. And Ukraine isn't alone. I mean, look at Moldova, look at Georgia, right? In Eastern Europe, Moldova and Georgia. For the party is banned. The SOR party, I forget, in Moldova is banned in 2023. Leader was sentenced to 15 years in absentia. Yevgenia Gutsul in Gagauzia, she was sentenced just recently to 7 years in prison. The opposition media has been shut down. Moldova is not free either. And in the West, especially the US, we are all over that. This is what I hope that people are listening to when they consider whether or not they should be supporting Ukraine, supporting Moldova. And I don't mean supporting Ukraine. I mean supporting U.S. interest in Ukraine. Ukraine is not our problem. Never has been. We're not going to solve these issues. They need to solve them on their own. And our attempts to solve them have obviously failed because what do we send over? We send up over a corrupt Joe Biden and his son, Hunter, right? That doesn't solve the problem. I mean, heck, before that, why don't we send over Hillary Clinton? Why don't we send over, what was her name? the lady who helped pick the leadership after the Maidan. Man, why can't I remember her name? Victoria Nuland. We send over people like that. That's what we do. We send over our own corrupt individuals to try to get this, resolved. And corrupt, probably not the right word. Corrupt, or certainly leaning one way, wanting a replacement of leadership in the country. There's no question that that's occurred on the U.S. side, and no question that the money that we send over there isn't being all used for valuable purposes, that it's being used to grease the wheels in certain respects too. So look at Georgia. Mikhail Saakashvili, who's the ex-president, he's been jailed since 2021, and his sentence was extended in 2025. His health collapse. Opposition leaders are selectively prosecuted or pardoned all over Georgia. Same thing as in Moldova. These are not areas where the U.S. needs to be involved, but we always have been. Through our U.S. Agency for International Development. Remember, I was in Moldova passing out medical supplies, if you want to call it that, in 1994. I forget, but it was corrupt as hell even then. Everything we supplied ended up on the markets that you would see on the weekend. And I reported that. Yeah, well, that happens. We're not in charge, basically, when I report it. We don't really control that. All we have to do is give it out. Oh, then why are we doing it? Would be my question. But, of course, who was I? I was a lowly interpreter who did nothing. But I saw the starts of this. And it's doing is continuing. Well, in closing, let's talk about the Clinton versus the Stalinist model. The Clinton model is a little lighter, of course, and so I like to refer to this Clinton as a little bit of what goes on in the U.S. The targeting of Trump, the use of the government to attack opposition leadership that are running against you or anything like that. It's the Clinton model, lawfare, creating scandal, uh, well placed leaking of information, or the ruining of your reputation. Like in a movie, you take a picture of some politician having sex with a prostitute, and you say, "Well, you do this," or we released a photo. This is what I refer to as more of the soft kill model of destroying people that the Clinton body count uh, seems to epitomize and always be present. So this sort of meme always persists in American politics, not necessarily the death, although we've had our share of some death as well. And in the Stalinist model, of a gulag and sending opposition or people who protest or broadcast their opposition to the gulag, they have bans on people. That's what's going on in Ukraine right now, is the Stalinist model. Okay. This is where they learned, I guess, or think that this is how it's supposed to be. But I disagree. So they have bans, they have prison, they got bullets, people dying. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia echo this theory even today. And as Americans, we just should not be part of this. So, again, in closing, this entire show has been about running for office, getting good people to engage and want to be a part of a system. And that's hard to do in America under the Clintonist models. It's even harder to do in the Stalinist sorts of models of Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, and the destruction, and other places in Eastern Europe. I believe we've covered it well enough to get there. But if you knew 7 of your colleagues died this month, like the AFD in Germany, would you want to run for office over there? If you knew your party could be dissolved, like in Ukraine, would you run for office? If you knew subpoenas and bankrupting trials, you got to hire a lawyer to defend yourself, would you run for office? If you knew your priest or your judge or your journalist, are next, would you want to be any of those people? Democracy and dictatorship have converged, and both of them clear the field. The only difference is whether they use lawyers or bullets. I wish to leave you with that and tell you that this is international flavor. The truth always tastes better here. You can follow me at internationalflavor.com. You can listen to me live at damradio.com/live Sunday through Thursday night, Chicago time, US. And that show goes for usually an hour and a half. This show has been a pre-recorded deep dive into corruption in politics and running for office, and will be played on Sunday on my Damn Radio show whilst I travel. The rest of the week will be live at that time. I encourage you to look at damradio.com/podcasts for other talk shows on our platform. And if you wish to have your own platform on Damn Radio, give me a call. Send me an email, samuelt@internationalflavor.com. Been very glad to have you. International Flavor, where the truth always tastes better.